Happy to bring on one of our favorites here, Chris Perfett. I was teasing that he's at a new location here. I want to talk to him about that. He's formerly of Pride of Detroit, but I think he's working for Fox Sports Radio now. So how's that new gig going here, Chris?
It's not actually that new. I've been working with them as a technical producer since about 2019 or so. But the last few months, I've been kind of moving into a update anchor role. So I'm actually I'm actually in a role at their news desk right now. Most of my time, just kind of appearing on various shows, working and getting all the updates from around the world of sports, making sure all the fine folks over at Fox Sports Radio affiliates know what's going on.
Well, if you want to jump in and update us on something mid-interview, just let me know. Just update us on anything random. I don't know that we're going to get a lot of Lions news broken. Maybe we'll have to time one of your appearances on the show based on the trade deadline so that we can have it where you can maybe update us on some of the things here.
And I'm still covering the Lions. I've actually been in the process of launching a new newsletter as well. Unfortunately, I've had some family matters to attend to that just cropped up this week. So I was actually hoping I could have it timed with appearing on your show, but circumstances have kind of forced my hand away from that for the time being.
Well, that would have been good.
I am still covering the NFL. It's still my favorite thing to do, and I'm still nuts for all of it.
Well, that would have been good intel. So we'll have you back on when that's ready here. We did have there's clearly a need and want for it, especially with how well the Lions are playing and how much news is out there. Obviously, you've got your former outfit in Pride of Detroit, but I talked with Justin Rogers for the first time on the show last week, and he went off and did the thing on his own, and I think that's gone way better than he expected, because you never quite know when you're on your own how that's going to go. But there's a lot of need for content, and it is amazing as we get more into it and into the off season. I've talked to some people that are like, well, it's preseason and I'm not paying attention, but there's a lot of people paying attention to this stuff, and I think there's some exciting stuff to talk about here. We'll kind of go through a few different things and figure out what you find interesting. But one of the things that I find interesting here is I have this weird dual sense with the defensive backs here so far, because it feels like I'm a little bit more confident in this defensive back group this year than I have been in previous years. And that might be a little bit backwards, because especially last year it looked like they had a ton of depth at the beginning of the year, and then it kind of waned, and then it seemed like no matter if they have it's smart that they don't have Vildor on their roster, because if they have Vildor on the roster, he's going to end up being the number 2 cornerback by the end of the season, no matter what. Like a Hawk is going to pick up one of the cornerbacks. I don't know what's going to happen, but something's going to happen where Vildor is going to be the number 2 corner. They've got a lot of guys that they've had to kind of shuffle in here, like Whiteside and Miller and a bunch of guys, but I can see the potential fit, and it's been interesting. In my notes, I have that Willy Wonka has taken over the defensive backs. It's like we're taking a tour of the factory and we're losing one as we go here, but I kind of like some of these replacements, so I'm curious what your thoughts on that room as a whole is, because I do think they got stronger from the starter perspective. They have obviously Arnold in his second year. He seemed to get his footing at the end of the year last year. I think they upgraded the other side with Reed. And now you've got these other young guys that could be filling in and looking pretty decent. But I'm curious of your thoughts on that.
Well, come with me and you will see a world of pure imagination.
Exactly.
You never know, because already, what was one of the first things we got out of this training camp, it seemed, was an injury to Ennis Rakestraw. And I am not aware of his timeline right now. But yes, to your point, it definitely seems a little deeper among the DBs right now, mostly because some strong showings. And I mean, obviously, we cannot ignore the big offseason signing that was DJ Reed, that I think kind of ties everything together with the departures that they had. Between Terry and Arnold, where you hope you see him take another year of the starters. But again, on that depth, besides almost, having a terrible incident on the field, Maurice Norris has been, fairly productive for the safeties group. And I've talked with a lot of people who are impressed with Rocky Sin that has brought to the DB's room. So, and I think this is going to be a lot more of a focus for the Lions as far as just, where they have the personnel. And it's definitely a lot of guys who made a lot of great strides last year, especially continuing the dominance of Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph and Amik Robertson, showing exactly his range, playing both nickel and corner. But I'm not sure that'll be the focus of the Lions ultimately, because I still hold that a lot of fans have just kind of completely forgotten about Aiden Hutchinson. I think the defense as a whole has a lot less room to go with a new coordinator because he is an internal hire, and it's just a lot of just hoping guys stay healthy as we move into the 2025 campaign.
I want to move to the defensive line here in a minute, because I think that's the other interesting group that Willy Wonka might be having a hand in as well. We're losing a couple guys there too, so that's not great, but that's also the attrition of football as well. But I just like that cornerback room and the defensive backfield as a whole. It's just got an interesting combination. You mentioned Yasin, but then you've got potential young guys there with Whiteside that looks like he might be making a run and making the roster, especially with some of the attrition that they've had. And then with the safeties, obviously the top two are set, best safety combo in the league, but having Maddox and potentially the local guy, Kennelly, behind those two, that's an interesting combo to me, because it's a little bit of promise with some experience in Maddox. And when Kennelly signed, it seemed like practice squad was too lofty for him, but with all the attrition, be interesting. And he's a Grand Valley State product, so it's kind of fun for the local folks here. But we want to move to that defensive line a little bit, because it seems like this is the group that the coaching staff and the personnel of the Lions disagree with the fan base most on, because they say, no, we like this group. This is our group. We know we have options. We know we have Zadarius Smith's phone number. We swear we have it. We didn't lose it. We don't have Rolodexes anymore, so we didn't put it in the Rolodex and then lose the card. We like our unit, but they have lost a couple guys now. We don't know what Hassanin's status is. You've got Owunzarike, who's already out. So there may be some room to add a body in there after they do some cutting down, and they know Smith doesn't really need a full camp. But I'm curious what you think of that line, because I do think that it is going to be tough to deal with this year. Obviously, you got a healthy Hutchinson back. I think those tackles are going to be tough to deal with, especially once McNeil comes back. And then as long as you have something more consistent on that other side, even if Davenport gets hurt, which hopefully he doesn't, you've got Muhammad with a full season as a Lion between the rest of last season and then a training camp now where it looks like he might be a better fit than he was last year.
Yeah, I think the big thing, again, is just it's a matter of Ali McNeil has to come back healthy. We'll get some Tyleik Williams look in that meantime. You need Marcus Davenport to stay healthy, which I know a lot of fans are very worried about, but this is a front office that is very confident he will play a full season. And to be honest, I've never liked grading guys as being an injury risk. I just don't think it's fair to the guys, and like how kind of nasty luck goes into. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it is football. The big thing is just going to be the size of this roster right now. I've been, I'm not exactly writing, my picks on who's going to get trimmed down from 90 men to 53, but there are going, like, as you say, this has not been a roster with a lot of starter jobs open, and in some places, not even like 2 or even 3 on the chart, right? Like I'm fully confident they'll carry Hassanin into the season so he can continue to get reps, and they'll carry Muhammad into the season because he's been fairly productive. But I'm not sure what the room is for someone like Nate Lynn. I'm not sure what the future holds for Broderick Martin, who feels like this is kind of the final year with him. And even going back into that, into the DBs group, I think Dan Jackson's on IR now, so never mind about that. But it's just, there's a lot of names, and it's a lot of rotations that have been playing in preseason, and it's always one of my favorite games, and I'm usually playing it with wide receivers. in the preseason. I guess we kind of have that, but I don't want to jump too far ahead there. But it's just, who the Lions are going to carry. And you just hope a lot of these guys, if they do like some of these guys, you can schlep them on down to the practice squad, and they won't get poked, or they won't end up on other rosters, because they clearly like a lot of these guys. They clearly get production out of a lot of them, but the ultimate struggle of the NFL seems to be the 53-man roster, and just how limited you are, and when injuries do pile up, how often you have to go to the streets to find able bodies to play on game day.
I agree, and there is a lot of gamesmanship here, because even, I know I brought this guy up a couple times, but you've got somebody like Nick Whiteside at the cornerback position, where he was a UFL pickup. He wasn't exactly a hotly contested pickup, but he's done well enough where through the joint practices, I know a lot of the Miami folks were raving about him. So if you're having to cut him, maybe he's one that gets scooped up versus a guy that maybe hasn't peaked, but you still like him. So there is a lot of strategy there. I do want to talk receivers for sure, but just for synergy purposes, we'll finish up with the linebackers, which has a lot of similarity to last year. But I like these improvements too. I like the way that Stewart and Cunningham play, and I think they're going to fill in nicely with Rodrigo being out, and then getting a healthy Barnes, I think, is going to be an underrated factor for the defensive line and the linebacker unit as a whole. You've got Hutchinson on that one side, and we focus a lot on, well, what's the pass rush going to be on the other side? Effectively, in some alignments, the pass rush isn't Davenport or Levi or whoever they put on that side. It's Barnes rushing from that side, and I think we're going to see that this year, hopefully.
Yeah, and I think I really like where the linebackers will go this year, partly because also we're now seeing Kelvin Shepard step into the defensive coordinator role. And for those at home who don't remember Kelvin Shepard's career, what he was doing before Aaron Glenn left town, he played linebacker, and he was the linebackers coach for 2 years. And I've often looked at this linebacker unit with Alex Anzalone and Jack Campbell and Derek Barnes to really be what has, the use of linebackers for the Detroit Lions has been where their defense has kind of raised and fallen. Yeah, I mean, especially under Aaron Glenn, where there were a lot of blitz packages, even bringing some safety help on the blitzes. But Alex Anzalone was, I thought when he got hurt last year, that was the tipping point from when this Lions defense went from treading water to a real liability. And that again, shows the importance of someone like Alex Anzalone. And what he means to this team. And unfortunately, this is one where they just don't have a lot of depth if those guys get hurt. Like, I think they like some of Anthony Pittman, and Grant Stewart, but I think Malcolm Rodriguez is hurt again, if I am not mistaken. You can correct me on that if I'm no, he was.
He is. You're right.
He was on the PUP list like last month, yeah. So I don't know if he'll get activated off of that anytime soon, but he's kind of like, I think as much as a fan favorite he is, he's not really being considered in any kind of realistic backup role at this point. Starter role, and maybe he can provide depth at this point. But I think the starters are locked in, and I think it's these guys more than anything, I hope, stay healthy right now, just because we've been waiting for some really good years out of Jack Campbell and Alex Anzalone. I know he's got some. He had some contract issues for a little bit there with the Lions, but he remains the veteran here. But this unit's the heart of it.
I think they're going to thrive this year, and then especially with improving that defensive line, obviously that's a rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing. If you're getting pressure and you're eating up space in the middle of that defense with the tackles, then the linebackers and the corners are going to have more of a chance to fill those gaps, pick off balls, et cetera, et cetera. But we'll take a quick break here. We'll move to the offense after the break and probably start with the receivers, because I think that's one of the most intriguing groups, and it's interesting to see how the tide has turned with some of the opinions on that group. So I want to talk about that with Chris Perfett after we come back from the break. Stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Coming back here with Chris Perfett of Fox Sports Radio, formerly of Pride of Detroit. Chris, you alluded to the receivers before the break. That's a very interesting unit. It's been one of the big topics of discussion here it's always a topic of discussion, but especially the last few years, they've had to improve that unit. St. Brown was obviously a huge hit. J-Mo looks like he's primed to have a very good year from what everybody's saying. I was trying to preview the game for our counter intel segment later in the show for the Texans, and I was looking at the two units, and no offense to any of the other teams out there, but I was starting to think, man, these might be two in the AFC and NFC respectively, they might be the two best, deepest units in the league. And I know I'm getting ahead of myself. A lot of these guys are young, but I like the way a lot of the young guys look. And you can really see this succession plan here with some of the guys they added, because they've got three guys essentially they added in the offseason, all rookies, and now they're pushing to make this team. A lot of the projections that I'm reading from Pride of Detroit and others are saying, hey, we might have a situation where Meeks, Lovett, and Tesla all make the 53-man roster.
That would be a tough one. I'm not sure how they would carry that many. At the end of the day, I still think in this mix as well. Tesla has definitely come along, and I was a big fan of Tesla, and I remember like back when I was still doing the podcast with those guys. I had been pounding the table on after his combine performance and kind of going deep on some of the tape from Arkansas, which was not great, but he didn't really exactly have anyone to throw to. Meeks I'm a little more leery on, just because, and I know his numbers are kind of eye-popping right now. I think he has something like 11 catches, 176 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's undrafted. He had some big quotes to, I think it was Local 4 in Detroit, saying that he believes he's one of the best players in the world, which is a lot of confidence. A little cynical in that I feel like I do this almost every other year or so with a undrafted wide receiver or a late drafted wide receiver. I can remember us all talking up Jace Billingsley. and I know Tom Kennedy is still kicking around, and I don't want to disparage him too much because I'm sure he'll be back on the practice squad at some point. But I feel like between that guy, who else? Zach Zenner was a running back, I remember back in the day, but everyone kind of fell in love with him. There always feels like there is a guy who really shows out in preseason that I don't really expect too much from the season itself. And as you say, this is an incredibly crowded room at this point. Now, they obviously want Tesla to factor into their plans long term, maybe even short term. I think they'll carry Tim Patrick into the season, but I could honestly see Tesla start to take snaps away from him as he gets more and more acclimated to the speed of the NFL. And his catching motions are great. He catches with his hands away from his body. People are already coming up with the nicknames for him, but he's not a receiver the Lions have had since it's tough. Probably since Kenny Golladay, just that big contested catch jump ball receiver. And that's been the one thing that's really been missing here. If there's any other attention to really give to the wide receivers right now, it's just my big question once we get to the season is going to be a matter of how is this going to look with John Morton as the wide receivers? As the new offensive coordinator, it sounds like even Amon-Ra St. Brown is going vertical now, which is very exciting. But yeah, I don't hold out a ton of hope. I think Dominic Lovett probably ends up on the practice squad. I think Jackson Meeks probably ends up on the practice squad. They'll carry Tesla and Khalif Raymond into the season. I could see them going probably 6-7. And I'm trying to think how many deep we really want to go before it starts. Again, I do not like trying to slim these things down to 53 men because I don't envy anyone's position to do that.
No, not at all. And like you said, it's preseason. Some of the Meek stuff was that he was against the third string folks and everything, but I can see the fit with some of these guys. And it has been interesting that a lot of these folks, I have a projection up right now. I think Pride of Detroit is similar, where they are carrying 7 receivers. You were asking between 6 and 7, and this particular one has Meeks, Lovett, Tesla, Raymond, Patrick, J-Mo, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, all 7 in. I think there's partially an argument to be made with putting Tim Patrick on the practice squad because it'll be easier to do that as a veteran. Not so much that he doesn't belong in the 53-man roster, but just from a roster construction standpoint. But yeah, it's an interesting group, and it should be fun, especially because, like you said, I think they're going to use St. Brown in different ways. I think Jameson Williams is poised for a big year with the hopefully improved route running, not any offseason drama here. He's been focused. The focus has been on the field. He looks like he's comfortable. It looks like he's going to have a lot of chemistry with Goff. And then, yeah, some of these young guys, and then Patrick and Raymond being the veterans in the room, but could be an interesting...
Well, if I may,
go ahead,
I think there's something to the Lions and the wide receivers too, and look, I am not going to disparage Ben Johnson. I refuse to do that. I know some Lions fans don't want to even hear his name and are already kind of coming up with excuses on why the Bears beat up on someone in the preseason, and but I do think the Lions will benefit this year from playing and I hate to use the word because it's a very tasty flavor, and I don't know why we use it to put it down, but I think the Lions could benefit from a little bit more of a vanilla offense this year. Ben Johnson was fantastic. I think some of the stuff he drew up at times was a little clever. What was one of my favorite phrases? Clever by half. Especially you'd see that in the NFC divisional game where they're trying things where they really don't need to. When it was creative and worked, it was fantastic. But I think the Lions, and especially when I mentioned Amon-Ra St. Brown going a lot more vertical, which we haven't really gotten when he was under Ben Johnson, that's kind of what I'm talking about. I think John Morton's his history being with the Jets back in the day, and it was a lot of I forget the actual stat off the top of my head, but they were one of the top teams at that point when it came to just kind of air yards, and but he just never had the personnel when he was there, and I think that was it the I don't think it was actually was it the Jets? Yeah, I think it was the Jets. Sorry, I'm buzzing my brain here. Yeah, he was an offensive coordinator for the Jets in 2017, and that year they had some just eye-popping numbers as far as attempting passes deep, but they just did not have the personnel. But I think he's got the personnel in Detroit to really do it, and I think Jared Goff's comfortable enough with any offense he's worked with. We've gotten a lot of papers written about how his back and forth he had with Ben Johnson, and I'm sure he's talking with John Morton and getting a lot of this stuff comfortable so he can run everything. And I think it'll be different for the Detroit Lions, but I don't think it'll be worse. I think that's kind of the interesting thing. I know a lot of people, especially on my national stage where I work now, talk a lot about how they just don't know how the Lions will handle losing two coordinators. But I don't see that situation really being the same as something like what we had with the Philadelphia Eagles when they lost both their coordinators. It feels like this is a lot more of a comfortable fit.
I think that's a good point. I think it's an interesting line to toe because I'm with you. I think Ben Johnson should have taken that Bears job. I think it's a good fit for him. I think just as human beings, we can understand that a promotion with more money, more prestige, more control in a different city would be something that a lot of people would be interested in and take in their own lives. So just looking at it from that perspective. But I do agree. I think if there's two things that I'm wondering about in Johnson's new role, it's his ability to lead as Ben Johnson and determine the culture as Ben Johnson, not as Campbell or not in the Campbell culture, because he can take some of that, but he's still got to be Ben Johnson. He can't pull off being Dan Campbell. He's got to be Ben Johnson and be a leader that way. The other one, I'm completely with you, Chris. I think that was one of the things last year that we saw is Ben Johnson was almost too smart for his own good sometimes. It was like he was countering what he thought the defense was going to do, and then he was losing Occam's razor in the meantime. He was losing no, this is probably what you should be doing. The run game is working. You're wearing them down. Let's do this. No, let's do an end around, or let's throw with JMO, or let's do this. And those are interesting plays, and the play construction was probably pretty good for the most part, but the timing was him outthinking himself, not him being outthought by somebody else.
Yeah, he would get away from the run game a little too many times when it would start to, they'd start to be low in the points, which always frustrated me. But then I always keep thinking about talking with them about what was it, the stumble? I don't know if we call it the stumble Ruski or the stumble bum or whatever that play was. Apparently, how Ben Johnson originally wanted to draw it up was basically actually putting the football on the ground. And Jared Goff said, "No, that sounds like that sounds like it could be a disaster. Let's simulate that it's a fumble. Let's not actually put the ball on the ground." So again, I think there's not enough credit given to how much, say, Jared Goff has in any offense that he works in now, and he is a veteran. He is a very savvy, very smart veteran. And I think ultimately, again, like I think you mentioned the culture in Chicago, and I know we're here to talk about the Lions. It'll be decided pretty quickly. I know Ben Johnson's a very energetic, a very direct person. From what I have seen over there, I think it'll work out for them. But I think again, this is a move that has, I think, worked out for everyone. And I think for the Lions, like again, just getting back to your fundamentals, still beating people on fourth down if you need to, but also just being aggressive, moving down the field is something that will just ultimately benefit them in the long run.
I agree, and I do think it's going to work out for both sides. I think he's constructed a good coaching staff over there. He took JT Barrett and Antoine Randall over there, which I think were two important parts of the offense here. So he'll have some of that culture, but they still retained a lot of it in Detroit. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here in the season. But I'm glad you could join the show. We'll look forward to you joining again. We'll have to have you back on when you get your new outfit up and running. But tell people where they can follow you here in the meantime.
Yeah, so I mean, main place for me right now is just on social media. I am on is it X now? Yeah, X at Chris Perfett. I'm also over on Blue Sky, which I'm a lot more active on at perfett.bsky.social. So that's PERFETT. And I'm working with Fox Sports Radio for their national coverage. I'm actually part of what I don't know if we're still calling it Red Zone Radio. I think we have to stop calling it that because of some ESPN issues or something. But we do have on Sundays on all Fox Sports Radio affiliates, we cover every NFL game and we talk about all the touchdowns and everything as they happen. I do that with Steve Hartman and his co-host and my good friend, the producer, Bo Benson. And I'm also doing update. I am a multi-tool weapon for Fox Sports Radio at this point because I will also then do news updates from our news desk at Fox Sports Radio. But those are wherever the affiliates are. We're on Sirius XM and wherever you get podcasts as well.
5-tool player, Chris Perfett. Be sure to follow him here. We appreciate you joining the show, and we'll look forward to having you back on soon.
Anytime, guys. Anytime.
Thanks, Chris. Talk to you later.
Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh is brought to you by
Mary Freebed, Collectible Insurance Services, West Michigan Eye Care Associates, Eric Hall Aesthetic and General Dentistry, Calder Financial, Grand Management Group, Encore Business Group, and Rydan Investments.
Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh.
Stay informed and stay vigilant.